John Lynch referenced yesterday when he spoke in Indy that he texted Tom Brady.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, he shared. John Lynch doesn't let anything out of the bag, but what do you think he actually texted Tom Brady? Do you think he was just simply, "Hey, congrats on a great career," or was it like, "Congrats on a great career, stay in shape and stay near your phone"? We may need to call you later. I mean,
Yeah.
where do you? Tom can go anywhere, and he's at
He can.
home.
He can.
And if the Niners season last year played out the same this year, they lost a quarterback early and they lost a quarterback in the middle of the year. And now we're looking ahead. Do you think that phone call gets made in the middle of the year to Tom Brady? And do you think he jumps at it? Or do you think he says, you know what? My legacy is my legacy. I'm leaving it right there.
Man, I don't know. Tom Brady's really hard to read. I I saw every Tom Brady game this year. I live in Tampa, and that's the game that's always on. I got to see him live versus the Ravens. And one thing I kept saying all year is, man, Tom Brady is still Tom Brady. Much like I just said with Aaron Rodgers, he can make all the throws and he doesn't get sacked a lot. No, I mean, you were seeing a lot of those good things. However, what I started to realize towards the end of the season, and it really showed itself in the playoffs, he's afraid to get hit. He doesn't want to get hit anymore. He's not taking, he's not playing against elite defenses like the 49ers and Dallas and taking 0 sacks because he's just the great Tom Brady and he gets rid of the ball so quickly and you're never going to outsmart Tom Brady. That's not why. It's because he's just absolutely afraid to get hit. He's not willing to take a shot to deliver a ball the way that he used to. And because of that, it was kind of confirmed when he retired and he said, "Hey, I don't like getting hit anymore." That's what his dad said that he had told him. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to get hit. So unless you have a drastic change in heart and you're really willing to take those shots again, I don't think he's coming back. However, I do think that a midseason thing could be a possibility because you're not having to go through all of it. And I do believe that John Lynch threw in some cheeky joke like, "Hey, man, great career. I would have loved to have you at some point. Ha ha ha." Something like that to kind of leave the door open and see what Tom Brady would reply with. If Tom Brady's like, "Yeah, I would have loved to be there too, dot, dot, dot." It's like, oh, okay, we got something here. You know what I mean? That's the
Yeah.
way that I feel he probably did is like, let's just throw it out there and see if there's any possibility that this door is actually open. I believe that. Yeah.
Okay. So if Lance and Purdy are 1-2, 2-1, and Rodgers too expensive. Brady stays retired. Now they're Lynch has referenced a third quarterback. Who's your third quarterback? How much are you willing to spend on that third quarterback? Um, is your third can the Niners, because of their defense, if they can, rebuild it a little bit, and their weapons, can the Niners get a quarterback who would go somewhere else to be number 2 to come there to be number 3? Because that's ultimately what they may be offering. Or, who's going to be that third quarterback? Can they aim high? Derek Carr is obviously going to get huge money.
Yep.
Brady's retired, but there's other guys. There's Carson Wentz now out there. He made a lot of money this last year. You have Marcus Mariota out there. I thought he looked great against the Niners in Atlanta this year. There's Sam Darnold. There's Teddy Bridgewater. There's Jacoby Brissett and others, Andy Dalton. Somebody threw out Nick Mullins' name earlier today. We don't know what's going to happen with Lamar Jackson. He may get traded. Sounds like the Ravens want him back. Who's the third quarterback if 1 and 2 are Purdy and Lance? Who's 3? Who's the
Yeah, I
ideal
think
3?
I think the ideal 3, who I think it'll be, is somebody closer to Mullins, to be frank, or a rookie that they draft. I think that's realistic. Who Now, if Purdy's out, then all those names that you just threw out are viable options because they're going to need a backup, and those are backup quarterbacks. Now, Wentz, I think there's a slight possibility you could get him to be the third guy just because he's really, I mean,
Broken. He's
talk about a
broken.
fall from grace. That guy has it. So all those other guys I think are for sure backups. I think Wentz could be a backup somewhere, but I also think he might be willing just maybe to be that third string guy on an off possibility. But if it's ideal and I'm getting who I want, Mariota or Heineke. That's what I want. And it depends on your starter. It
That's
depends on
interesting.
your start. If your starter is Trey Lance, then I want Mariota because I want Mariota to mimic Trey Lance. And if your starter is Purdy, then I want Heineke because Heineke is Brock. I mean, they're the same dude roughly. So
Gamer,
that, yeah, gamer, undersized, quick,
not
takes
afraid.
risks.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're very, very similar. So that's what I would prefer to do. So we'll see how it plays out, but I don't think either one of those guys are necessarily willing to be third stringers. I wouldn't if I'm them.
So you're one of the only people that is kind of. I've said Mariota. Now maybe I'll admit I get too swayed, and this is not just football. This happens in other sports too. When a player plays well against my team, I hold them in higher regard. And he had a game against the Niners where he completed 93%, and they converted a boatload of third downs, and he looked really, really good. Um, am I putting too much into that Niner game? What is it? What's the side of Mariota that I'm maybe not seeing? Is there what do people who don't like Mariota not like about him? He's 6'4", he's 220, seems like a good kid. He throws a pretty good ball. He's definitely fast. I mean, what is it? If you don't like Mariota, what's the reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on what's the area you don't like. Do you not like him as a backup? Because I don't know. I don't know why anybody wouldn't want him as a backup. I can understand not liking him as a starter. I mean, what has he proven to be a long-term starter in this league? It's nothing.
Right.
He's been given his chances. That's not the case. Mariota actually, for me, Larry was my number one quarterback target last offseason because not only could he do some of the same things that you're going to want to do with Trey, but he was what, the second pick in a draft? He's
Right.
been through
Behind
it.
Winston.
He was supposed to be the franchise guy. He ended up not being the franchise guy. And I just thought from a mental standpoint, he really could be there for Trey Lance and help him through some of those ups and downs that he's going to see and the boos if you're not playing well and really just navigating through being the franchise guy and would be able to help him there. That's what the way that I thought of Mariota. And so he was my number one target last year as the backup. Unfortunately, he was able to get a starting job. Well, unfortunately, because now Brock Purdy's here and that's great. But that's who I wanted last year. So if Trey Lance is the starter, then that to me remains the same. But I don't think I think it's hard to find a lot wrong with Mariota as your backup quarterback. That's just me personally. As a
Yeah.
starter, sure, but I don't. I mean, find me these people that don't want Mariota as a backup, man. I think he would be great.
What about some of the other names that you're hearing? And I'll tell you, I really don't like some of these names. Here's one. Edison says trade for Matt Ryan. I thought Matt Ryan was done. Not a fan.
No, no,
Val
I
Ramos says
he
Jarrett
looks washed.
Stidham from the Raiders. Played
Sure.
well against the Niners.
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, as a third string for sure. Yes, absolutely. I think Stidham would be a fine option. If Stidham had to come in and play for the 49ers, do I think that he could win games with this roster? Yes, I do. I believe that. And that's essential. It's very essential at this point.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. I kind of think that Mariota is interesting from the standpoint of Mariota, in my opinion, Jesse, is the best guy that you can get who could start games, but also could be satisfied as the number 3 quarterback. You know what I mean? And I would say you might be able to get him for 6-7 million. He made 9.3 this year. What would you want to pay the third quarterback?
Oh man. So the reason I don't think he would be satisfied as the third guy is because they had a crazy ending in Atlanta because he wasn't the guy down the stretch. So now you're going to say you wanted to be the guy, you were willing to leave a franchise and kind of break character. I mean, that's not Mariota's character at all. I mean, at Oregon he was beloved, in the NFL he's been nothing but a team guy, and now all of a sudden he breaks character because he wasn't going to be the starter the rest of the year and felt like he should be. So now he's going to be the third string guy. Unless I'm just reading that situation wrong and maybe there was a promise of some sort that Atlanta broke and that's why he acted that way. I don't know. But that's why I don't think he would be willing to be the third string guy. However, if he was willing, what would I pay him? I mean, I think anything $8 million or less I'd be comfortable with.
Yeah.
I think
A
that's
couple
fair.
last ones before we let you go, because there's we could talk all night, but there's, I want to let you get on with the rest of your night. John Lynch explained down in Indy why Steve Wilks was a great fit with the Niners. In your opinion, how is I mean, there's still a lot of players that have to be added, and a lot of it's based on your personnel, what kind of defense you play. I mean, if you have corners, you maybe play man. If you don't have corners, maybe you play a ton of zone. Wilks is kind of known to play zone, and then he'll send 5 and 6 man rushes at the quarterback and maybe blitz a little bit more than D'Amico. What do you expect a Steve Wilks defense to look different than what we've seen this year?
I think a lot of that depends on Shanahan. I mean, one thing we have learned, I feel like over the last 2 years, is that Shanahan has a lot of say in the defense. A lot of say. He's the one that chooses who starts. And so I think that he also chooses a lot of that scheme and what they run and what he's comfortable with. One thing that I loved that Lynch backed up, which is kind of the thought that I think a lot of us had who had done our homework on Wilks, is that personality-wise, he's an exact fit with this team. And what they had in Saleh, what they had in D'Amico, they now keep in Wilks, which is important. They're getting a guy who can galvanize the troops. Opposite of Shanahan in that front, as far as he's willing to show a lot of emotion on the sidelines and be a rah-rah guy, which I think is a great contrast for a guy like Shanahan. Very different than what Fangio would have brought to the table. And so I think that personality fit is mainly the reason that he is here. And to your point, I think he's a little bit more aggressive of a blitzer. But what I would expect to see is a really tight secondary. And it sounds like Gibson's going to be back. Bosa even talked about that he thinks Mosley's going to be back. So they're going to have the talent there. And Wilks is known to be a defensive back guy. I think that secondary will take over as the strength of this defense, which that hasn't been the case for a long time. The linebackers are still going to be very good. But when I talk about that front four or that secondary, I think that secondary is going to be the strength over the front four going forward with Wilks and some of those players that it sounds like are coming back.
You think Gibson comes back? You think Mosley comes back? You think Jimmy comes back? Or you think they all
I don't think Jimmy comes back, but Bosa said on with Sherman that he believes that Mosley will be back. And then rumor came out, well, not rumor, Lynch talked about it, that there's mutual interest between Gibson and the 49ers, that Gibson's not necessarily done. And if he's going to play for a team, it's going to likely be the 49ers. So I think Gibson and Mosley are both back, it sounds like.